All right. Welcome everyone to our first AI in Action at WCU webinar. My name is Dr. Tom Pantasis, and I am an instructional designer with the Teaching and Learning Center. I want to thank you all for being here with us today, either in person or watching this recording after the live event. We really appreciate that you're taking some of your precious time to learn more about AI in education. I also want to take this instant to thank today's presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Urban, for sharing some of her wisdom and experience with us today. Thank you, Elizabeth. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping and informational items to go over with you. First, as I mentioned, this is part of a larger series this semester. This is our upcoming schedule. If you're interested in attending any of these future sessions, we will put a link to the registration page in the chat. You do have to register to attend each session. Registration is required for each session individually, and the times and dates do vary. You'll see we have one session per week. If you are interested in registering on your phone, you can also scan this QR code, which will take you to the registration page as well. So if you're watching this as a recording, you could pause right now and take your picture. In addition to this webinar series, the TLC has AI resources available on our website. These resources include sample syllabus statements, tips to consider when talking to students about AI, strategies, and links to relevant TLC AI blog posts, which you can see here on the screen. Speaking of the blog holds a collection of different types of resources, including past webinar recordings, posts from fellow Westchester University faculty about how they're addressing and dealing with AI, podcast episodes, and much more. We are constantly adding material to the blog, so we encourage you to check it out on a regular basis. And again, I just put those links to both the website and the blog in the chat. But if you'd like to scan the QR code to get those links, you can do that as well. One last item to call everyone's attention to, the new AI guiding framework that the university just released. It has 6 key recommendations, and we encourage folks to check that out. And I will also put that in the chat, or a link to that in the chat, but there won't be a QR code for that one. So here is our agenda for today, and we are still ahead of schedule, which is excellent. If you have any questions while this presentation is going on, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it as we go. However, we won't answer any questions until we reach our final 10 minutes. At that point, we'll also open it up for some discussion. I'll be keeping an eye on the time, and we'll try to hold us to these time limits as best I can. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing so that our presenter can take over the screen. And while she is getting ready, let me introduce you to Dr. Elizabeth Urban, who is presenting on student AI policy creation. Elizabeth is an associate professor in the history department, according to the website. So hopefully they have that correct. And at this point, I will say, take it away, Dr. Urban.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me? Okay, I unmuted myself. Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. I hope this webinar is useful for people. Today I'm going to be talking about student AI policy creation, something that I talked a little bit about on the podcast episode that Tom actually recently showed, is that I make policies together with my students in a lot of different ways, including AI. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I do that.
So Elizabeth, we see your presenter notes. I don't know if you
Uh-oh.
want to switch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
If you hit swap display, yeah, there we go. Now we're good.
Okay, perfect. Very useful. Okay, so here's my overview. And as you'll see, it's not a simple, okay, here's the policy, throw it at the students, or start with some kind of amorphous, I don't know, what do y'all think we should do? Instead, I have some steps for us, which is first to discuss the student learning goals, then to brainstorm how they might use AI, to analyze those AI uses, including the pros and cons of them, but also to connect them back to those learning goals and say, does this help you with that learning goal, or is this getting in the way of that learning goal? Then demonstrate for them based on some of what they tell you the uses are, and have kind of play around with it in front of the students to help them see what you mean when you're discussing certain aspects of AI with them. Teach them a little bit about skillful alternatives to AI, and then craft a policy based on your discussion. And I recommend ending with a statement of trust and accountability. So I'll go through each of these step by step. First of all, to discuss the student learning goals and have them add their own. Obviously, our syllabi are supposed to have these SLOs. I often go over those with students and kind of help them see that this is what they're supposed to be getting out of class, and that even if they get an A in class, but they haven't achieved these learning goals in a certain way, they've failed the class, right? And to really focus on learning rather than getting the grade in class or getting the gen ed credit in my class. And then having them add their own to have a little bit more of a sense of accountability of what do you hope to get out of the class. This is important because then you're going to tie the AI use into those learning goals. So if they say, for example, what I want to learn in this class is how to write better, and then they say, oh, I'll just use AI to offload all my writing, there might be a disconnect there. Then I always ask students, I usually do this on the second day of class. The first day is a little bit more like welcome to the class and doing some fun stuff and getting an introduction to the topic of the class. The second day is the day when we go over the syllabus and the policies, and then also the AI policy. I ask them to brainstorm AI uses. How have you used it? How could it be used? How do your friends use it? And they'll name everything from using it to create images for presentations, brainstorming ideas, correcting their grammar, you name it. They list a lot of things. I have students always say, "Oh, I use it for research." And then we have a discussion about that. But first step is just, you can do this in small groups, get them to name all the AI uses. But then the next step is get them to analyze those AI uses. I ask them to do two things. One, to think about the pros or benefits of what are you getting from that kind of AI use and what is the detriment. So just for example, saying, okay, what about this idea that students often say, using AI to brainstorm a potential paper topic for you? Well, what are some pros or benefits? Why do this? Right? It might give you some direction, helps you narrow down some ideas, it gets you started, gets the ball rolling. And then the cons or the detriments might be, well, first of all, with all AI use, there's a potential detriment of very high energy cost of using AI tools, generative AI tools, compared to using a Google search, for example. An AI search takes a lot more energy. It may not be relevant to course themes. So I'll show you in a moment an example of, oh, I'm taking Dr. Urban's Modern Middle East class. I don't know what my final paper topic should be. What should I do? And if AI just spits out some random topics that aren't even anything like what we covered in that class, that might pose a problem. And then also may not be interesting or relevant to you. And one of the ways I get my students to succeed in my classes is by trying to connect the topic of my classes to what they're interested in. So we kind of do this for several of the different types of AI use, and then also ask them to connect it to the learning goals, right? So if one of the learning goals in my Modern Middle East class is to explore the possibility and the diversity of this society that you might not know very much about, this might be really useful for them to say, I don't know, well, let's ask the AI to brainstorm for me. But then we also talk about how we can't just stop there. It can't just be a one-step process of, oh, AI told me what paper to write, so I'm done. The explore, this is the fun part in my opinion, and you can play around with AI yourself. And I saw on the AI in Action schedule that there's going to be some other webinars about this kind of a thing. But I'll give you some examples of kind of demonstrating to the students what it is that you're exploring. So I'm going to try to switch my screen real quick to show you an example of what I might show my students. Okay, stop this share. Start a new share. You can hear, I have to do this with my students in class. You're getting to see behind the veil here. Okay, and start a new share. Okay, so my students this semester have said that they're very interested in music in the Middle East. So I show them, okay, AI, who are some famous pop musicians from the 20th century Middle East? And then it gives you a nice long list. And, it tells you where they're from, when they lived. And so then I'll ask my students, how might they decide which of these musicians they might be interested in learning more about? And then I say, okay, well, let's just say what a lot of students do is I'm just going to choose the first one that it gives me, because how do I know? And I ask about Kulthum and say, hey, could you write a 300-word summary of Kulthum's life? And then we can talk about, okay, it gives us a little chunk of text. And I say, would this be okay to do in class, to get this and then just to simply present this as your paper? And of course they know, no, that's not okay. But is this part of it okay? We kind of talk through their sense of the pros and cons of using it this way. Then I say something like, thanks, could you tell me where I could find more about Kulthum? Books, documentaries, videos, etc. And then it'll tell you, okay, here are some books, here are some documentaries, here's some other resources. All right, so that was one example on the ones that the students told me they were interested in. And they essentially said that this kind of use is okay, but you don't want to be the student who just chooses the first one on the list because you get overwhelmed. You need to actually take the time to look through the list, think about it, explore it a little bit. They all talk about how this is not okay. If you're going to do anything like present this as your own work, this might be a great way to get a summary. But we talk about how I'd actually rather have them go to Wikipedia and read a kind of a published online source about Kulthum rather than just have the AI do this, or certainly not just stopping with the AI and considering this to be enough, quote unquote, research, as they call it. And then this one we talk about, this is a very useful use of AI, of finding what we might call academic, talking about real research resources for learning more about Kulthum. One other example I could give is just, okay, I have to write a paper for my Modern Middle East class. I have no ideas. What should I write about? It's funny because when I did this in class, my Google, or the AI rather, knows, it says here, since you have a strong background in early Islamic history, which is my research topic, so it thinks it's talking to me and tailoring it to what it already knows about me. And it gives me some ideas. And we talk about with my students, well, some of these are things we're really going to be covering in class. Other ones are pretty tangential. So don't just run with these ideas, right? So then where can I learn more, right? So we kind of talk about what are we allowed to do and what are we not allowed to do with specific examples. I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint. That's it. And we're going to go current slide, and we're going to go switch the screen. Okay, so demonstrate. It takes some minutes, right? But it's fun for the students, and it's an engaging activity. You're not just kind of blathering at them about your policy. You're getting them involved in the creation of the policy. Something else you can do, but I think this is maybe more fitting for some of the later webinars, is really helping them see the ways that using AI can be a shortcut for students who aren't expert in a topic yet, but it's kind of it's a shortcut that shortchanges some of their learning. Whereas if you're an expert in not just a particular topic, but in academic ways of thinking, you have building skills that then are transferable and applicable. So what I mean by this is I give them an example of an AI-generated book review and a person-generated book review, one that I wrote myself. I would guess that most academics, whether or not you're in my field, could instantly pick out which one of these is AI generated and which one is not. The students get it wrong every time. And we can talk about why and how. And if you're trying to use AI and you're not expert, you can't tell that it's wrong. You take its confident language as truth, and you're shortchanging yourself from getting the actual expertise and the actual depth of knowledge and the actual skills that it takes to be able to assess AI output. So Here's just an example of which is real and which is AI generated. I'd be curious to know what you all think. So a review of Bernard K. Freeman's Possessed by the Right Hand, published in 2019. One of these is by me and one of these is by ChatGPT. I won't read the whole thing, but just the first paragraph, right? The last several years have seen an explosion of scholarly interest in slavery in the Islamic world and other global contexts. Recent contributions to this field include Jonathan A.C. Brown's Slavery in Islam and Mary Ann Fay's edited volume Slavery in the Islamic World. A new edition of Orlando Patterson's seminal Slavery and Social Death has also recently been published with a new preface. And then I continue. Okay. Then here's the other one I give to the students. Bernard Freeman's Possessed by the Right Hand is an enlightening journey into the intricate intersections of agency, justice, and human rights within the Islamic legal tradition. Through meticulous research and eloquent prose, Freeman guides readers on a thought-provoking exploration that challenges assumptions and broadens perspectives. So from your perspective, if you are a faculty member, I'm hoping that you could tell this first one is a real book review that I actually wrote. And the way you can tell that is that it's got specifics. It mentions specific names, it mentions specific fields, etc. However, this one is extremely vague, right? An exploration that challenges assumptions. Oh, which assumptions? It broadens perspectives. Oh, really? Which ones? It's an enlightening journey. So the students get really taken um, right. And it's not, so you can't, I see in the chat, it's not like instantly easily obvious, but if you compare the two, and especially as you keep reading, the first one has details. This one sounds beautiful, but is ultimately pretty fluffy and doesn't have any there. And so doing this with the students in class can help them see, oh, if I don't learn how to do the actual thinking behind what the AI is telling me, I will not be equipped to tell the one from the other. Based on all this conversation, which to me takes a good maybe 30 minutes in the second day of class, we talk about what are alternatives to some of these ways of using AI. So my students will say, oh, I use AI to look up synonyms for words. And I tell them, oh, I'd much rather you use a thesaurus because a thesaurus is a published thing. It's stable on the internet. It's a tool for you to explore and you can cite it. Whereas if you're using AI, A, you're using a lot more energy, but B, it's the computer thinking. I'd rather see the human thinking. Wikipedia, book reviews, text in your field, anything published by a real person, I tell them I would prefer over AI because you can cite it and because you can trace it back. And then practicing the critical inquiry and research methods. Based on all that, we'll craft a policy. So here's an example of mine, which I think we can probably share also as a helpful document. And this is based on what the students say. The students say, we never think we or our fellow students should be able to simply copy and paste our work from AI. They still do it sometimes, but they know they shouldn't. And then say what you're going to do as a follow-up. But then I say, okay, you may use them to come up with ideas, but then you have to think critically about it. You can use AI tools to help with your work, but you must document your AI use. So I talk about, give me a screenshot of your conversation. Everything you submit is considered your own work and you're responsible for it. And then I always recall them to some of the values that we've talked about or some of the course learning outcomes that we've talked about. And then the last step is the last step of my talk also, which is to conclude with telling the students that you trust them and that they're accountable to you and to themselves. I end with this now because when I first took my very first training with the TLC, um, oh, I can tell you in a moment, Tom, about that claim. So for the first time I took AI training with the TLC, the very first question was, don't think about it too long, just answer the question. Do you trust your students? Do you not trust your students? And I wrote, I don't trust them. And I hated that answer. And so it made me realize I want to trust my students. I'm going to tell my students that I trust them. I'm not going to try to police them and catch them. I trust them. And if they violate that trust, that's on them, not on me. And that is my conclusion. Where am I getting the idea of high AI use or high AI energy use? Um, well, that's a great question, Tom, because I don't think I have a really strong source for it. I think I've, read about it on social media probably. So,
Mhm.
do you
So
have any
I,
more
I
resources?
asked that particular question because it's like a really open debate at the moment.
Hmm.
Originally, I was under the impression like, yeah, high energy use, like it's not great, but we're starting to see some more concrete data that's like, it's not actually quite as bad as we thought it was.
Hmm.
Like, so for folks that are trying to like put their stamp of like, we're not using this because it's bad for the environment, it uses a ton of energy. Well, there's some stuff out there that's saying like it's using the same amount as watching a Netflix episode, so you're gonna stop watching Netflix episodes? Like,
Okay, I love this because this is what we want to do, right? Is we want to
yeah.
ask for the evidence.
Yeah,
And
and it's not like it does have an environmental impact. There is an impact. We're just not 100% clear on what it is yet, and it may
yeah,
not be as bad as it's been portrayed.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Okay, that's very
I,
interesting.
I'm gonna add, anytime somebody brings it up now, I'm gonna be like, so where did you get that from?
Yeah, yeah, because I'm sure I got it from, you know, Wikipedia or not Wikipedia,
So
Instagram or something like this.
yeah, Madison asked another question here. Have you gotten any feedback from students after working with them to create a policy?
Yes. Often the feedback I get from students is, well, A, it's useful to have a clear policy for the class because it's unclear, there's not a general policy. So even just talking it through them is helpful. A lot of the students are using AI, but a lot of them are very skeptical of AI. So a lot of them haven't even, played around with ChatGPT. So I have found them because they think just using it at all is cheating. Like even just asking it any kind of question at all is either a slippery slope, or I've had students say, why are we even talking about using AI at all in this classroom? Where every once in a while I have a student who will say, we should just be not having any AI. And then we can talk about, well, first of all, that's not going to be feasible for me to police. How am I going to know if you're using AI for brainstorming? But then, well, we look at it, we play with it a little bit, and they say that they appreciate getting a chance to kind of see it in action. And then, yeah, I have students who are going to be high school teachers in the future who say it's actually really helpful to see like the creation of a policy.
Cool. That is like, I didn't even think about that helping future teachers, but that's a really good idea.
Yeah. I have had one, so I'd say this conversation actually goes over better with gen ed students.
Mhm.
When I tried to have this conversation with my upper level Arab Israeli conflict class this semester, they were just like, fine, fine, Dr. Urban, fine. We want to get on with the like content of the course. We're all upper level history majors. We all kind of know the drill. So, but I would say generally speaking with the gen ed courses, I always have a pretty positive feedback.
And that's an interesting distinction. Like, given that experience in a future semester, will you tailor the way you approach that based on level of course? Like, what would you change, I guess, with your upper level students with this conversation next time around to like better target their specific areas of expertise?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say the student I mentioned to Madison before who kind of said, why are we using AI at all? That was in a grad class. And
Mm.
so maybe in grad classes, maybe it's less appropriate to use AI. I don't know. We could talk about that. Maybe we should be learning how to use the course specific and field specific resources out there rather than asking AI. But yeah, I think in the future, when it comes to the upper level history major students, I might just make the conversation a little bit less involved. I might still have it, but I might not go through all the steps of brainstorm how you might use AI, but have it be more like for this class, the Arab-Israeli conflict. Let's play around with what AI will tell us about the causes of the October 7th, 2023 attacks. What does the AI say about that? And kind of help us see that the AI isn't going to be a replacement for thinking. So maybe what I'm trying to say is tailor it more to the upper level students and the actual content of what we're trying to learn in that course.
Well, and I almost wonder too, is there a place to, particularly with history, to do some simulation work with AI to treat it as a simulation tool to give some more real-time response in certain scenarios with an eye towards the accuracy, because that's always a piece that you want to keep an eye on.
Right. Well, and that's the challenge, I think. And one of the things that historians talk a lot about is where do historical facts come from in the first place, right? They don't just fall from the sky. They come from documents and artifacts, and we have to read. They're not always dated. They're not always named. We only have them from some voices and not from other voices. So there's a whole process, a historical thinking process into how do we even get facts. And it's doing that process that allows you to be able to tell a, real fact from a fake fact, a claim that's not supported. And so because the AI, at least in the way I've played around with it, you have to specifically ask it, give me the documents, tell me where I can find these sources. If you just ask it to spout out facts, who knows where it's
Yeah, and it would depend on the AI tool, I would think too, because some are better at saying like, here's where I got this information and here's where I got this information, and others just give it to you with no citation attached. Um, okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that for just a second. But we want to say thank you again, Elizabeth, for your time and expertise. And for those of you that may be watching this recording after the fact, we will have some of the resources that she's mentioned. Dr. Urban has already written a blog post on this that has an example of her policy and some of the steps that she's taken. And we'll have a link to the podcast episode as well, where we went a little more in depth of why she does this and what she does with students. So thank you, Dr. Urban, for your time and effort today. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, Tom and Madison, for having me today.